Hello everyone. Today we are talking about chapter 14 of Daehaeng Kunsinim's translation of the Diamond Sutra. And we're working from her Korean translation into the English translation done by the Hanmaum International Culture Institute. And I have to say this is a pretty good translation. And I also have to say that I was the one helping with this, so a little bit of false modesty there. The title on chapter 14 is Ultimate Tranquility Comes After Leaving Behind Fixed Ideas and Views. And I'm not sure that ultimate tranquility is exactly the right expression. The key point is leave behind fixed views and perceptions. And then there's something that comes next. If you're a little bit lazy, you could say awakening, or understanding would be kind of a worse one, but true awakening, true perception, something beyond, right? Tranquility is actually not a bad word, but like true peace and understanding, it's something that I think it's one of those things where if you haven't deeply awakened yourself, you're only guessing what Kunsinim meant here. You have to have some fundamental pieces to really understand what she's saying here. And I think this is one of those. But the key point is leave behind your fixed views and ideas. That's the one you want to start with. Okay, and the opening of this chapter is kind of interesting. I'll go ahead and read the first few lines on page 139. Hearing these non-dual teachings, Subhuti deeply awakened. The father and son had met, his true nature, which had guided him over eons, and his present consciousness had combined. So this is Daehaeng Kunsinim describing Subhuti's awakening. And she used this expression in other talks sometimes. The father of the past meets the son of the present. This true nature, which is my present consciousness, isn't separate from it, right? My present consciousness is the manifestation of that. But because, I guess you could say karma, because of habits of perceptions, I'm not aware of it. I only see a limited aspect. So that's Subhuti. In this chapter, Subhuti awakens to this non-dual essence. And so I'm a little bit, this non-dual essence and where you go from here could be the title of this chapter, in my understanding. Now, I'm not going to bet my understanding against Daehaeng Kunsinim's understanding. If she wants to call it something different, then that's probably best. But for me, this chapter seems to be about the essentials or the key points of this non-dual essence. What's going on when you realize this? Okay, So on page 145, 145쪽 저 위에, there's an interesting short piece. Just one paragraph, and it seems kind of random in a way. But it says, if someone awakens, then even though they use words such as I did, I am, or I'm unsurpassed. Now, normally, if you hear this, I did, I am, that's like a giant red flag that somebody is still stuck in dualism, right? But here, it's saying if a truly awakened person, when they use the word I am, I did, I am, or I'm unsurpassed. So it says, this I is coming from this non-dual whole. right? This I is describing the workings of the non-dual whole. And and then it goes on to say the last three lines are, for such a person has already left behind all dualistic ideas and fixed views, right? The funny thing is this really, for some reason, it touches right upon what Jesus said. When Jesus said, believe in me, right? I don't think he was talking about himself as a person. He was saying, this me is the whole. It could also be, I suspect there's a chance that if you look at the Greek, believe in me means do what I told you to do, right? Not believe, Chong Sunim always said, don't believe in this lump of flesh of mine. When there was a very famous Sunim, when he passed away and they cremated his body, they found a great number of these small crystal beads, of, all different sizes. We call them sarira in Korean. And in English, sometimes they're translated as relics. And sometimes you find these after great practitioners are cremated. And somebody asked Chong Sunim about this, and she just said, the Buddha said, follow my meaning, not my body. And because she didn't think these were particularly important. Somebody from the Science Institute asked her one time in a interview, said, we'd like to research these. How do they come about? And she said, making those is really easy. And then the interview got distracted and went on to a different question, and the interviewer never followed up with how. But she just dismissed it as, that's really easy. And there's stories in Korean about those things being like thieves having sari, somebody who focuses on something really intensely for over a long period of time has them. And so it's not just a spiritual thing. It's kind of irrelevant in a way, because it could be the sign of a very spiritual person. But if you needed that kind of a sign to follow them in the first place, then you already don't really understand what they're talking about. So the value is pretty limited. But so anyway, it's possible for somebody who's deeply awakened to say, I am, I did, but they're not talking about themselves as a person. They're talking about this whole. Because they're not separating themselves out from that. Okay. On page 147, there's a very interesting piece that starts here. So a lot of what's going, chapter 14 of the Diamond Sutra is fascinating. There's more than one thing to take away from this. I'm only going to cover what I can cover in the time tonight, because I could spend the next 3 weeks talking about chapter 14. And the Diamond Sutra has 32 chapters, so I need to pick it up and move along a little bit. But to me, chapter 14 is talking about understanding the non-dual essence of reality, or the non-dual essence of existence, of the way the world is. And there's two key aspects that I pick up in chapter 14. One of them is, if I've awakened, right, I understand that I am the source of what I experience. Right? I'm not separate from other people. I'm not separate from this whole. So if I'm experiencing something, it's because of my participation in this whole. I may not, there are definitely things where I didn't have a lot to do with them happening to me. My contribution may have only been, hey, I want to go out to the store and pick up some groceries. That may have been the only contributing factor I had in something that happened next. But I was still the one who decided I wanted to go out and do that. I'm playing a role in all of this. So I'm the source of everything I experience. I'm not separate from any of that, right? If I blame you for something that happens to me, the way we process blame, mentally, it's 100% on you. And the power and the authority to change it and to correct it and to fix it and to prevent it are 100% on this other person, right? And so it's the government's fault, it's politicians' fault, it's my parents' fault, it's my teacher's fault. They may not have done a good job, right? That's quite possible. But when I say that, when I say it's their fault, I've denuded myself. I've chopped all my limbs and leaves off and everything. I've taken away my ability to do anything about the situation. You did it, and so I'm just sitting here like a beggar with a bowl saying, please, can I have a few drops of water? Please pay attention, please see me, please do something to help me. No, don't walk by. That's what I'm doing to myself when I say it's your fault. And, Kyobo Sunim is saying fundamentally that's not true anyway. But when I realize I'm participating in this, then at the minimum, there's a piece I can control. There's a minimum, I have an input, right? It may be like the Titanic where it takes a long time to turn, but I have an input. And if I keep inputting that and I keep working on that, then it's like I get to vote every single time that comes up. I keep voting that no, things should go this way. Things begin to move that way. How much they change and how fast they change depends upon my own spiritual ability, my own karma, my karmic connection, and some other stuff. But they begin to change, right? If I say, I don't want to live like this for any more of my lives, right? Who knows how many lives I've lived like this. I'm tired of it. I'm done with that. I'm gonna live better. And I start making up my mind like this. It's like, I want to remember when I start messing up or when I get lost. I want to remember to pay attention and notice that and then trust that thought again and say, no, we're not doing that. We're going this way. And things begin to change because in this whole, there's no big or small. Right? Because you can't separate out something from something else, fundamentally, there's no piece that's bigger than some other piece, right? There's no, the Korean is, the rough translation of the Korean is equal emptiness, 평등 공복, which is a really terrible translation. But the concept doesn't lend itself to English particularly well. But undifferentiated, unseparated, flowing wholeness is the kind of the idea that we're talking about. And so at this fundamental level, the president has a lot of power and I don't have any power. That's not the way it works. There's no big or small. In a way, you could say, I'm not sure you can say this, but it may be the case that everybody gets a vote. My vote is equal to his vote or to their vote. And so, people say, the changing the weather is a big thing, and getting a cup of cool water is a small thing. But like I said, there's no big or small. Don't limit yourself to one thing. Now, it may be the case that the farmers need the rain or the farmers need the snow, So it's not just you being affected by it. If you say, hey, let's knock off the rain, there may be something else going on as well. But yeah, so that's the first. This I am the source of all that I experience. That's hugely powerful. And the other aspect of that, and it's talked about in chapter 14 as well, is the idea of non-dual compassion. Right? When you perceive this whole, then your life, your hardship, your joy is exactly my hardship and my joy. And I feel that. And so, if you give, I hope everybody's had this experience where you just unconditionally give something to somebody else. You just, here, let me help you out. You don't think about a reward. You don't think about, do they deserve it? They just need it. Or it makes them happy, or it makes them laugh, and you just do it. And it's this selflessness. Because, I guess you could say this kind of selflessness is a great manifestation, or is a very, very nice, high-level manifestation of this non-duality. And so there's a lot of the Daehaeng Sutra, and I think it could be read as proscriptive, where if you want to become awakened, make your behavior in tune with this. And if they always say about awakening happens in an instant, and cleaning up all your karma takes a whole long time afterwards, because it all shows up one piece after another. While alive, we have to wait in lines. While dead, we have to wait in lines. Even our karma has to wait in line. So the karma that's in line ahead of the other karma still has to come out. So you can see people who do very bad things, and they still seem to be having a good life. Well, it just may be the case that they still have good karma that's still at the front of the line, and all the bad karma hasn't come up to the front yet. Or vice versa. I've been doing very good things, but my life has been really rough. Well, it may be that there's some stuff at the front that's got to be cleaned up before the nicer stuff has a chance to show up. And so one of the aspects of that is when you see this stuff in your life, like, I'm being a little bit self-centered about helping these people, or I'm being a little bit, it's a little bit of a sign to us, this is something I need to clean up. This is something I need to take care of. And on page 147, there is 147 and 149. So Bek Saship Chijok, Bek Saship Kujok is the beginning of one of the really amazing pieces of Daehaeng Sunim's translation of the Daehaeng Sutra. I'll go ahead and read it. For Subhuti, this is page 147, the third paragraph. For Subhuti, even when it felt like my own root, my own inner king was tearing my body to pieces, I was able to view everything from this deep place of one mind and see mind and matter as one functioning whole, because I had no thoughts of I did, or I'm superior. When my flesh was being lashed and urged forward, urged forward by my inner father, when my body hurt so much that it felt as if it was being torn limb from limb, if I had been focused on the material aspect, or thought that things existed apart from myself, then I wouldn't have understood that my presence is the source of everything I experience. Instead, I would have fallen into resentment, into hatred, into despising. Now, that's this is the first half of this, of what's going on here. And so the Buddha is saying that he suffered a lot. And he goes on to say that this was like 500 lifetimes after he'd already been awakened, right? And so all this suffering is coming to him, but he gets through it because he's letting go. He doesn't have, well, in this case, he's free of thoughts of I did, or I am, or I'm better than these people, kinds of things. But, so this is also in many ways, the Diamond Sutra is not a manual for spiritual practice, because it's very advanced, it's very deep. But this is one of those pieces where it's giving us something that can be reverse engineered as a guide, or saying, the Buddha got through this because he was free of thoughts of I did, or I am, or I'm better than. And so this is a hint, if we're suffering, if we're having a hard time, let go of these thoughts. Pay attention, and that stupid politician or whoever, or she did this to me, or he did this to me, or I'm sick, I'm hurting, I have this disease, right? Let go of that I. Let go of that, because that I is like it's just something that all this stuff passing by gunks onto. If you see a bridge after a flood, you see all the broken branches and the leaves, not the leaves, but the branches with the leaves and everything, all piled up, all the garbage piled up around the bridge pilings, right, as the water flows by. Well, this I is like that piling that collects all the garbage and all the sewage, and everything going by just sticks onto it. And you have a problem where that is. But you remove the I, you let go of this thought of I, and all that stuff just passes by and doesn't cause any problems. And so, the other thing is, if I had been focused on the material aspect, or thought that things existed apart from myself. So, and I'm not sure exactly all the nuances of focused on the material aspect, right? Focused on my body, worried about damage done to my body, because that's possible. But Daehaeng Sunim said, sooner or later your body's going to go away. If you take care of it, it'll last a bit longer, and if you abuse it, you'll need to replace it sooner. And that may be what she's talking about. It could be money, right? Because so many people get themselves into trouble over what are actually like small amounts of money. You all hear stories about people losing their minds over an inheritance of $10,000 or 10 million won. Brothers and sisters getting into deep disagreements over what are just actually really small amounts of money. You can't live for a year on you can't even live for a year on some of those amounts of money, and it's just like, anyway. Another part of the material aspect might be people's behavior. Somebody does something and you find it really objectionable, and it gets easy to get stuck on that. And that time you did this, this is what I saw you doing. And again, it might be better just to let go of that stuff and not get too caught up in it. So the next part on page 149, 151, I'll go ahead and read. Subhuti, even over the course of 500 lifetimes, where there was ultimately no past, present, or future, when I was already free from the view that there was a me that was doing things, free from the view of having attained a certain level of spiritual evolution, free from the view of others existing as unawakened beings, free from the view of being constrained by time or space, I still nonetheless had to return inwardly all the suffering and hardships I experienced in those times and in those realms. So this is what I was talking about before. The Buddha said that for 500 lifetimes, he was already free of the view of I, but he still had to return all that suffering and all those hardships inwardly. Like, it was still capable. If he hadn't done that, then, supposedly you can't forget, you can't lose a true enlightenment like this. You can't move back to where you were before. But I suspect you can still get the consequences of that. So even though the Buddha was at this state, he still had to do this work. So how about us who aren't at that stage yet? How much more do we need to be doing this work? I think that's an interesting point of this chapter. And so there's several more quite interesting things about the chapter 14. But the main point, so if we look at page 151, the Buddha's talking about unconditional compassion, helping others unconditionally. On the last 4 lines on page 151, he says, "You must not get caught up in the material world, and should instead take all smells, physical contact, perceptions, and receive knowledge, and return it inwardly." So all that stuff that we think is going on, sight, smell, taste, that we perceive through sight, smell, taste, touch, and cognition, take all of that and entrust that. Don't get too caught up in what we think we're seeing. Because what we think we're seeing, and we may be correct, it's still only one aspect. I think you probably remember the story from last time about this Sunim whose behavior was a little bit not so polite, and he was really annoying me. And Daehaeng Sunim said, she just kind of laughed it off, and she said, "If you could see how he behaved in his past life, he's so much better. He's doing so good." And I was like, oh, okay, if that's all right, because she was seeing the whole continuity. Continuity? Is that the right word? Sometimes continuum. I think that's the word I was looking for. Continuum. Some days I can't speak Korean or English. She was seeing the whole continuum, and so the one little bump on that I was seeing and was annoying me, she was putting that in the context. Said, no, he's doing so much better. He's improved so much. And so we shouldn't get too, even if somebody's not improving, their behavior is just a momentary blip. And somebody else said something that's a little bit like that. Their shame is not my problem, right? Their bad behavior is not my shame. That's just their bad behavior. So even though somebody behaves badly, even though, me treating them decently is not a problem. Of course, you need to have boundaries, and you need to make sure nobody's abusing you. But even though he behaves terribly, me being polite and courteous towards him, that's, like I said last time, that's me teaching all the cells in my body, all the consciousness in my body, how to behave. And so I benefit from that, even if somebody else doesn't reciprocate that. All the lives in my body are, in a sense, getting an upgrade. They're being taught how we should behave. And the fact that somebody else doesn't understand that, or they don't see that, or they don't respond to that, doesn't hurt me, right? Because that's not what I've been teaching the lives in my body. And if when we leave this life, we take nothing with us, right? We don't take our body with us. We don't seem to take our memories with us. But if there's one thing we do take, it's our habits, right? This habit energy keeps rolling on, rolling on, rolling on. And if we have this letting go and entrusting and getting in touch with this foundation, if we make that a deep habit, then even in our next life, even if we don't immediately meet a good teacher, that'll still be instinctive. So we want to practice to the point where that really gets instinctive, where even in the middle of the weirdest dream, oh right, I got to return this and let go of it. That's just an instinct, because that's what we can take with us. So I'll go ahead and stop here for the 30-minute portion of our talk today. But so go ahead and check out chapter 13, because there's so many good little bits and pieces that are just, it all ties together. But just by reverse engineering some of these pieces, it's like, oh, this is what I should be doing. This is what I can be doing. And you can learn from all of this. All right. Thank you very much.